Hello everyone. If you're looking to paint a Overlord with Translocation, Orb, Shard, Cape, whatever you want to call it, then this is the video for you. Specifically if you want to do the Nihilakh Dynasty. So as you see here, we're going to start with Sautech Green, and I've already sprayed the model with Lead Belcher. It's also in two separate parts, kind of like the scythe part as well as the entire body. So first we're going to start with Sautech Green. Basically what we're doing is we're going to go over the entire shoulder pads as well as kind of like the thigh armor, and eventually we're going to do like the inner ankh. So what's nice about this paint is that it's technically a layer paint, but you can treat it as a base paint. I mean, I've been using it almost straight out of the pot, and it covers as well as a base paint does. You'll want to thin it a little bit, just so it doesn't get too globby, but basically we're going to take this and go over the entire model that needs it. So once we finish up with the shoulder pad parts, we're going to move on to the thigh area. Now there should be one on the left side and the right side. I kind of cut it out a little bit, but basically you're going to want to paint both the thigh armors as well as the... And now we're going to move on to the ankh. So basically we're just going to take the Sautech Green, thin it down a little bit, fill in the ankh. Next we're going to move to Retributor Armor. This is the gold I like to use. If there's gold that you prefer, then that's obviously something you can use, but I just kind of like the color of this one. Here I'm using it to fill in the kind of shoulder piece almost, whatever the metal shoulder piece is. And then obviously I'm going to move on to like the outside of the ankh, so that's going to be in gold. So you kind of want like the under parts of it, the side parts of it, as well as the top and the bottom. Next we're going to move on to the kind of headpiece and the face. I like to paint this entire thing gold. So basically go over the entire mask, gold, front sides and the back. I don't really like to do the back of the head, but I will do the back of like the headpiece. So this is all going to be done in Retributor Gold. Once this is done, I'm moving on to Lead Belcher, and this is basically just to clean up some mistakes here and there. To be honest with you, this probably doesn't need to be done quite yet, but I was just feeling like I wanted to fix some of my mistakes. I kind of used my Sautech Green quite liberally, so I wanted to kind of cover some of those parts. We're going to make plenty of mistakes later, so this is a step that can be done a little bit later to fix the mistakes, but let's just fix what we can right now. Next we're going to do is we're going to go back to the Retributor Armor, and now we're going to actually paint the raised ankh surface. So after we're done with this, you should be able to actually see the ankh in gold. And I don't know, I really like the blue under gold on top contrast. I think it just really makes the ankh stand out. Next what we're going to do is we're going to go over the entire Lead Belcher part and a little bit of the Retributor Armor with Agrax Earthshade. So we're actually going to mix Agrax Earthshade with Laminate Medium. I don't really know why. This is the new Agrax Earthshade. GW decided to change the formula. If you're me, I hate it. I hate the formula. I don't know what they did to it. I don't know if they tried to make it more like a contrast paint. Nobody asked for that. But here we are with the Agrax Earthshade. So now I have to mix it with Laminate Medium now to get kind of like the consistency and the shine that I want. So I'm kind of doing like a 3-to-1. I'm getting 3 nice bristlefuls. And then going to wipe my brush off and then put a little bit of Laminate Medium in there. And this is just to make it a little bit less shiny. Because if you just straight up apply this Agrax Earthshade, it's just going to be way too shiny. So add this over all of the Lead Belcher parts, and eventually we're going to add it a little bit onto the gold parts. Once we're done with that, we're basically, as I said before, just going to add it onto the face a little bit, as well as like the little shoulder, like chest parts, just to give that gold a little bit of depth. We are going to end up using a different paint later though. So basically, as you see, we've moved on to the arms. So we want to add this Agrax Earthshade mix to the arms, as well as the bottom of the staff, as well as the top of the staff, wherever like the metal parts are that you can see. Next, we're going to move on to Nuln Oil. This is a classic. Again, this is the new kind of shade. So again, I'm going to mix the Nuln Oil with the Lemon Medium. I just don't get it. I don't know why they changed it. This is the new Nuln Oil. You kind of have to mix it a little bit, or else it's just a little too shiny, I find. And yes, I have shaken it up enough. I don't think that's my problem. So what we're going to do here is we're going to add the Nuln Oil and Lemon Medium mixture to both the metal as well as the Satek green part. Obviously, you want to make sure that you're not pooling in anywhere you're not really supposed to. So once this part of the model is done, we can start to move off to the staff. So for the staff part, you're basically going to want to do all the metal parts. You can also do the base of the staff now. This part we're going to be going over later, but for now you can coat it with Nuln Oil. We're going to move on to Cassandora Yellow. Absolutely love this paint. I think it really just brings out the depth of the gold a little bit more, or a lot a bit more. This one I like to just use straight up, so I'll put a little bit on my palette. If you really think it's a little too strong, you can water it down a little bit, just a little bit. But you still want it to be quite strong. So you're going to add this to all of the gold parts, minus the Ankh area. You can do around the Ankh area, but you don't really want to do right on it, otherwise the yellow is going to be added to the blue. It's going to make it look green. So next what we're going to do is we're going to take Satek green, and we're going to work on the face part. So basically, as you know, in a lot of the Nihilakh paint schemes, they always have a gold mask with a blue stripe down their face. So here we're going to add that blue stripe on the face. And on the model, you'll see it's really nice and laid out for you. Just follow the lines. You'll be good to go. Next, what we're going to do is use Basilicum Gray, however you want to say it. Gray. It's the gray contrast paint. We're going to use this, and we're going to kind of go between all of the joints. I really like the contrast that this brings out in the model. What you're going to do is basically any place that there's not an armor over, you're going to add this to. So it's kind of like the ankles and a little bit up. It's going to be on the hands. It's going to be on like the forearms. You're also going to want to work on like the underbelly part, like where all the cables are. You're going to want to add this all over the cable section. Now when we get to the hands, we're actually going to do all of the hands, as well as this upper metal part, as well as like the forearms. Next, we're going to take our Black Templar contrast paint, and we're going to use this specifically for the staff. What's nice about this is not only is it a lot easier to use than the Abaddon Black, but it kind of gives that metal, you know, it lets the metal undertone still show through the slightest bit. So next we're going to move on to Satek green, as well as Skink green, and the Nihilakh oxide. So this part, what we're going to do is we're going to go back over the armor, but we're going to use a dry brush instead. And this is going to give it almost like a weathered look to it. So we're going to take our Satek green first. We're going to add a little bit to our brush, just the tip of our brush, and then we're going to try to wipe it off on our paper towel. Once we've done this, we're going to apply it over our blue parts. Once we're done with the dry brushing over the model, over the blue parts, you're going to want to move on to skink blue. This is just kind of like a lighter but still greenish, tonish blue, which is what we're looking for. So same thing, get a little bit on a brush, dry it off, and apply it to the model. So this part you're going to want to focus more on the edges. You don't want to apply it all over, but really focus on like more of the edges of the model. Next, we're going to move on to Nihilakh Oxide. You might think, that's a technical paint. Why? How is this next? Well, we're going to attempt, and keyword attempt, to dry brush it, or just very lightly put it on the armor. If you've ever wondered how the Nihilakh schemes, specifically from GW, have this kind of very greeny tint to it, I'm 90% sure this is what they used. So you kind of add it to your brush, get a lot of it off, like a lot of it off, and you just slightly kind of speckle it on the armor almost. You kind of speckle it on, drag it, speckle it on, drag it. You can't dry brush it, but you can speckle it on and drag it. And that's exactly what we're going to do. Just go random directions, make it look very weathered. It's going to add a really cool texture to the model. Okay, once we're done with that, we're going to move on to our next step, which is going to be our null and oil. So for this, recently we added the blue to the face mask. The blue's a little too strong, so we're going to add a little bit of null and oil just to that blue strip that we added. And once we do that, we're basically going to go around the carapace of the armor where all like the divots are. Like as you can see, there's a little circle on his leg. So we're going to take the null and oil and just kind of get into the divots, because the Nihilakh Oxide actually went into there because it's a liquid paint. So it went into like all the little crevices and stuff. So we're going to take the null and oil and fix all of those little mistakes. Next, we're going to move on to lead belcher. Again, this is a cleanup step. You're using it to basically just, I'm sure you got blue somewhere, so you're going to take this and fix all those little spots that you may have left a little blue on. Next, we're going to move to Caliban green. This is going to be used for the coils. There's a tiny little wire that goes on the belly of the model, and you're going to take Caliban green and paint that little wire that's on the belly. I appear to be picking a cat hair off my thingy here, apparently. And Caliban green's a really thick paint. You're going to want to water that down a little bit, otherwise it's going to be just a little too globby. So as you can see, a little cable wire. You don't want to do the ones that look like hoses, not hoses, but you know, those weird futuristic hoses. You don't want to do those ones, just the flat ones. Next, we're going to move on to the blade. So for the blade, we're going to put the Caliban green all over it. Now, when you use the lead belcher paint, spray paint, it's really shiny, and the paint just does not like to stick to it. As you can see, I'm using Caliban green here, and I have to constantly go over the blade because it just will not stick. But this is an essential first step to painting the blade, I find. Just get the Caliban green on it, and just get that nice even coat. So we'll be ready for our next steps. Next, we're going to move on to Warpstone Glow. I know I super quickly flashed that, but Warpstone Glow, basically the next step down from Caliban green. What we're going to use for that is the under cables. We're going to do just a nice little green line. You don't have to be perfect with this. Warpstone Glow kind of sucks as a paint. It's just, the pigment's not great. If you water it down, it takes like 8 billion coats. So just do one nice thin coat right across the cable here. And I'll just make it stand out a little bit. Next, we're going to move on to Incubi Darkness. This is the fun part. Take a big glob of this, throw it on your palette, and water it down a bit because it's a very thick paint, and you're going to just go over the entire translocation area. I'm going to call these translocation cubes. As you can see, it's very cubey. Just looks kind of weird. Reminds me of like Destiny almost, if you've ever played that. Specifically, you know what, I don't remember his name. The first raid boss, you know who I'm talking about. It reminds me of that. Just the look of it, the Vex, all that. You know, all that fun stuff. Either way, you're going to paint that entire part with this color. Once we're done with that on both the scythe and the model, we are going to move on to the weathering step. So for this, we're going to use Rhinox Hide. I really like the brown it brings. you can use any brown really, as long as it's like a dark brown. Then we're going to use a sponge. I find kind of like the foamy type sponges are the best for that. You want to just cut out a little square. Basically, you want to grab it. You can use like tweezers if you want, but if you're not afraid to get your fingers dirty, just pinch it and then just dab it into the little upper part. So you're going to get a little bit on your sponge, dab most of it off, and I mean like most of it off. Kind of similar to dry brushing. Like dab it off on a paper towel as well. Just try a good amount off. So for here, we're going to use it on the blue armor. We're not really going to use it anywhere else. I find that the way it looks on the blue armor is really nice. You know, kind of gives that extremely weathered look, which is what we're going for. I mean, they're Necrons, come on, they're old. Not supposed to look perfect. So for all the hard to reach places, we're going to use dry brush, because I just can't reach all the parts of this model with that sponge. I just can't. So basically take a dry brush, dab some paint on it, dab most of it off, and then just dab those parts that you can't reach. So maybe like the face mask, like the shoulder parts that are like a little bit underneath the raised parts. Then next we're going to move on to Iron Warriors. This is kind of like a darker metal paint, so we're going to use this to dab over our blue carapace armor, kind of where our brown was. So wherever you did the brown, you want to do a little bit of metal as well to just show that like exposed metal, the paint scratched off. And you're also going to use this on the gold. So the face, the shoulder piece, the ankh. You're going to want to use that silver on all of it. Next, we're going to move on to Necron Compound. So this is just to give the model back a little bit of its shine. You know, we used 2 washes by now, so it's a little bit drab in a way. So take a little bit of Necron Compound and just kind of go over the metal parts. Now you don't want to worry about like the in-between parts where we did the gray contrast paint. You just want to do the upper parts, the upper raised parts with the Necron Compound. Once we're done with that, we're going to move on to Capillite Green. And this is where we're going to actually start working on the translocation cubes. So there's 3 paints we're going to use. It's going to be that, Sybarite Green, sorry, Capillite Green, Sybarite Green, and then Gauze Blaster Green. So many greens, it's hard to keep track of all the names, I'll be honest with you. Green, light green, and very light green. So first we're going to start with Capillite Green. These paints are not great at dry brushing, and we're going to dry brush this next part. I'll be honest with you, you could go through and wet blend this entire thing. If that's what you want to do and highlight the entire thing, by all means go ahead. If enough people want me to do that or want to see it, I can do it. It's too big of a piece. I just don't really feel like spending an excessive amount of time on just that. Now it's a really cool part of the model. I think dry brushing is the way to go here, and hopefully you'll see at the end of this what a nice effect it'll have. So for the Capillite Green, you're going to want to dry brush it and basically go over the entire translocation cubes, like almost all of them. You can kind of leave the ones near the base of the model, but overall I would just go over all of them with this Capillite Green dry brush. Again, layer paint, not a great dry brush. You're going to have to get a lot on your tip and dry a lot of it off. It's kind of tedious, but that's what we got to do. Next, we're going to move on to Sybarite Green. It's going to be a very similar process. So what you want to do is grab a Sybarite Green, maybe even mix it a little bit with the Capillite Green to get a little bit darker green. And you're going to want to dry brush this well. You're going to dry brush this on more of the prominent areas, like the points that are just sticking out at you. That's what you want to dry brush. Any really raised part, or part that you think the eye is going to catch. And next we're going to move on to Gauze Blaster Green. So once we're satisfied with our increased color tones, we're going to go to the very bright color and go to the very tops of it and dry brush those. Now you can be kind of sporadic or random with this. I honestly think it looks better if you're kind of random with it. It doesn't have to be the highest point up, but I find that to be easier. Next we're going to move on to the scythe. So same process here, Gabolite green, Sybarite green, then Gauss Blaster green. This one I was more just liberal with it, just kind of applying it all over the place. Okay, so let's look at what it looks like kind of together. So here's them all together, and honestly, I think it looks great. You can wet blend it if you want. I think this looks similar to the box art if you were to take out the wet blending and the highlighting. The colors are there, the colors are the same. So we're gonna go with that. So actually we're gonna move back onto Sautek green. So this is gonna be for the scythe. Kind of like where the Ankh is, where the blade is, you're gonna wanna paint that blue. And again, you might need to use 2 coats here, but Sautek green it's a pretty good paint. You probably won't need to thin it much. Then we're going to move on to Retributor armor. So this is where we're going to work on the actual raised Ankh part. So go ahead and get a decent amount on your tip. You'll want to be very careful with this. Although it is raised, it's kind of hard. You have to be meticulous and make sure your tip is just right on top of the Ankh. And that's about done. Nice and easy. Doesn't have to be perfect. Should be kind of weathered, so nothing too crazy. Next, we're moving on to Caliban green, and this is where we're going to work on the orb. So basically, the little orb he's holding, his resurrection orb. You're going to want to paint that with a Caliban green as a base. Some people like to paint this white and use like a fluorescent green paint over that. It's definitely an option, but I prefer to just do Caliban green. So now we're actually going to go to the blade. So we're going to start with Black Templar contrast paint, and what we're going to do is we're kind of just going to piece out our segments here. I'm going to walk through the entire wet blending segment. So we're going to start with Black Templar. As you can see in the box art and stuff like that, usually the ends of it have kind of like this black bark to it, and I find that Black Templar over this Caliban green looks fantastic, and it's super easy, much easier to use than Abaddon Black. Use Black Templar, it's a great paint. So next we're going to move on to the very light section. So we're going to use Moot Green and Dorn Yellow. Moot Green, great paint. Dorn Yellow, one of the worst. It just dries out like crazy, but it's still going to be effective here, so we're just going to wet it a bunch. So with these 2 paints, we're just going to grab a little bit of Dorn Yellow, like a big old chunk of it, just put it on our palette. Big giant chunk. Wipe our brush off and work over to the Moot Green. Get that on our palette. Apparently I just got water there. And that looks a little bit better. Then what we're going to do is we're going to mix the 2. So a nice mix of Dorn Yellow and Moot Green. And the key to this is in the name, wet blending. You want it to be wet, water, or some sort of medium, and you're going to blend it. You're going to in the name. So we're going to take this mixture, and we're going to work on the ends of the blade. So kind of where we hit the black, just like the opposite. Think yin yang. If this one end is black, this other end is the Moot Green Dorn Yellow mixture. Now we're just going to paint this entire thing. This is very thin. You're doing a light paint over a dark paint. It's going to take about 3-4 coats, maybe. Don't do it thick. It's going to look terrible. Just do it thin. Multiple coats. Okay, so once we're done with that, I mean, look pretty good, doesn't need to be perfect. We're gonna take a slight step away. So we're gonna move on to Gracier, just because we want this to be dry by the time we're ready to use our green paint. So we're gonna put this on like the top of the orb, on top of the staff. This is more of like a glowing green orb, rather than like a green phase blade. So we're gonna use Gracier for this. I find Gracier to be one of the best white paints. The coverage is good. You can thin it down a little bit. It works perfect. So we're gonna do it for the orbs. Then we're gonna move on to the model. We're gonna do his little back shoulder orbs, both of them, and his eye sockets. And again, I did like a couple coats of this just to get that full coverage. Next, we're going to move on to Warpstone Glow. So this is another just kind of blocking section. Warpstone Glow kind of sucks as a paint, so I try to use it in the in-between parts so I already have a base, because if you're trying to wet blend with Warpstone Green, it just takes forever. So any of the in-between parts between your black and your green sections, you're going to use Warpstone Green. So once we've got those sectioned out a little bit with our nice base coat, we're going to start the actual wet blending process. So first we're going to go back to our mixture of Dorn Yellow and Mood Green. We're going to start working on our top of the green parts. So we're going to go from that yellow-green to the more just green. And you're going to want to just keep going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth between your Mood Green and your Dorn Yellow, so you can get that transition looking real nice. And again, make this super thin. The thinner it is, the better it is. You just put a thin paint over, the transition is going to look great because you're going to see that undercoat. It's going to be perfect. Once that's done, we're going to start mixing our Mood Green with our Warpstone Glow. This one I find you need to add a significant amount more Warpstone Glow to get that darker pigment. So we're going to start working on that Mood Green section, transitioning it to the Warpstone Glow section. Again, keyword, keep it wet, keep it flowing. Transitions are just easy to do with that wet. Next, we're just working on the Warpstone Glow part. Keeping this wet as well. Pushing it a little bit further. And obviously I'm just doing some touch-up work here. Making sure all the transitions are pretty smooth. And this just takes practice. I mean, you're going to have to just try it. I would say use my method here where you block it out with the 3 different colors, then transition between them all. Don't start at one color and move all the way to the other. It's too hard. So now we're going to move on Caliban Green to Mood Green. Sorry, Warpstone Glow. So we're going to transition these 2 colors here. And we already have a little bit of this Caliban Green down on the blade. This was our initial step. There probably still isn't much left. But this is a very, very quick and subtle change. You still need this to get to that darker color, but this is going to show up on like one tiny line on the model, but you still need it. If any mistakes are made, it's okay. Just shade and wet blend right over it. See that? Nice and thin. Just going to work our way down. Just kind of smooth it into the blade. Just work with the colors we previously had. So now I'm kind of going through and fixing some of the transitions here, or if I overextended in some parts, I'm gonna fix that with the previous colors. Next, we're gonna move on to our contrast Black Templar, and what we're gonna do here is a really cool step. We're gonna mix the Black Templar with our Caliban green for the final transition, and this is super easy. Take a Black Templar, put on the palette, slightly put some Caliban green in it. You're gonna get this really like very dark green black paint. You're gonna just paint that over your Caliban green step and just transition it in. Just very light, subtle change, but it is awesome. Once we do that, we're going to just use straight Black Templar to finish that final transition. Take that Black Templar, put it over that mix, and just finish out the blend. Next, I'm going through and just kind of doing some fixing. If there's any parts I noticed that may not have blended so well, I'm going to just go through and fix all those parts. Next, we're going to move on to the Dorn Yellow highlight. So this is going to be for the very ends of the blade. What you're going to do is literally take it, thin it out, and start painting it on the exact ends of the blade, like where the sharp part would be. Wish my camera was a little bit more focused, but you get the idea. Dorn Yellow on the blade. You might have to do multiple coats of this. This paint's very thin. Once we do that, so we do all the outsides, you want to do the inside. This takes very, very light hand work. You want to go through and do all the middle highlight parts where the blades kind of meet together to try and get that nice line to distinguish between your two sides of the blade. This is crucial. You want something to do this. There are other better paints to do this than Dorn Yellow, but this is just the paint I have. I like to stick to GW paints for this, so there we go. There's our completed phase blade. I think it looks pretty good. Wet blending was easy. Bada bing, bada boom. So next we're going to move on to the orb. So what I like to do is I'm just going to take the colors I already have on my palette, and just kind of paint all around the orb in a random fashion. I mean, you know, the Resurrection Orb just kind of has a weird look to it aesthetically, so I just kind of paint in every which direction with whatever paint. It's kind of little squigglies, and I think it looks pretty good. I mean, you could dry brush this if you wanted to have it be kind of glowy. You could even put like a clear coat over it so it looks like it's like an actual orb, kind of like a Palantir from Lord of the Rings. But you know, nothing too crazy. It's just a green ball, so however you want to paint a green ball, then there you go. So next we're going to move on to Incubi Darkness, and this is going to be to highlight the staff. So when we were using the staff, like we used the Black Templar to paint it black, now we're going to use this this kind of dark bluish color to highlight that black. I find blue highlights black really well. I think it's sharper than gray. It just depends on the model. So we're going to use this to highlight all of the lines on the staff. Next we're going to move on to Nolan Oil. So this is going to be for the Ankh that we did before. So we're going to paint that Nolan Oil again. Well, not again, for the first time, because we haven't painted it before. So basically Nolan Oil over the entire Ankh. And you get over the gold too. Just kind of dirty it up a little bit. Next, we're going to move on to the little cable near the orb. So this should already be Caliban green. Not Caliban green. Yeah, it is Caliban green. You're just going to use the moot green that you have in your palette and paint over that. So it just kind of has like a slight little light green highlight to it. Nothing crazy. I think I even went to... so I did Warpstone first, and then I did just a tiny bit of moot. Make it stand out a little bit more. Next, we're going to move on to our lovely friend, Tesseract Glow. This paint can suck. The pigment sits at the bottom. Make sure you take a literal paintbrush, like the bottom of the paintbrush, and you just jab in there and get all the gooey parts under from the bottom. Bring it to the top and mix it in. Otherwise, you just get that yellow pigment, and that looks like crap. So you want to really mix it in, like the green with the yellow pigment. Thin it out a little bit. And this is basically, we're going to just go over all of the white parts that we painted. So like the eye sockets, the shoulder orbs, and then the orb on top of the staff. And this is just to make it look like things are glowing. I mean, I think this is an easy paint to use, as long as you use the white. You just don't want it to glob up, or else it looks kind of bad. But it's just like a nice fluorescent yellow-green. I think it looks really good. Of course, you don't want to just use this for the most part, because then you're just like, rah, bright green. So instead what you're going to want to do, which I'll show a little bit later, is you're going to want to mix the Tesseract Glow with the Dorn Yellow and kind of work your way up from green to yellow. I'll give it a little bit of a transition. So I put a little bit on the orb just to make it stand out a little bit more. You don't have to do this. I just think it looks kind of cool. It's already green. Might as well make it more green, right? So I'm going over the orbs again. I just didn't like the initial green colors. I'm just putting a little bit more on there. And same thing for the eye sockets. So those are those parts complete. So that's the blade completely done. And this is the actual Overlord completely done. Again, I really like the little cubey parts with the dry brush. I think it looks really good. So, time to glue it together. I like Loctite super glue, as you can see. But you can use whatever kind of glue you want. So once that's together finally, because the entire thing is painted, this is where we're going to do our final little bit with the Dorn Yellow and the Tesseract Glow. So we're going to mix these two together. And just kind of work our way up from the green to the yellow as the brightest. You can do a white if you want. I don't really like a transition from green to white. I think it kind of dulls it out, but the yellow looks real nice. So again, we're just going to go over that orb, kind of like the top part. And we're going to do the same thing for the back orbs as well. Kind of work our way up from that darker green to like a lighter yellow. And I'm doing a little bit on the outside of the orbs here, kind of like a light effect. It doesn't look all that great, but basically it's like, oh hey, look, it's glowing a little bit, and it's showing a little bit on the armor. So yeah, that's a complete Overlord. Thanks for watching. Also, as you can see, I did not paint the base here, but that's because, you know, everybody's got different bases. You paint it however you want.